Hello, welcome to the conversation in New Central Television. This is the program where we bring you all the updates and political happenings on the continent of Africa. I am Gbenga Aborowa.
And I am Rita Omodia. We have different political stories around the continent, and today on the conversation, we'll be going to Angola, where the elections are just less than 48 hours and citizens are getting ready to vote.
And in South Africa, the leader of the economic freedom fighters, Julius Malema, has been accused of political imposition, and provincial structures of the party are preparing to elect a new leadership next month.
Lots of stories there for Angola, about 14 million registered voters coming in for Angola, and the elections are just on Wednesday, so I can just imagine the anticipation.
We're not even done with Kenyan elections because, it's going to the courts. Raila Odinga... Raila Odinga filed in his papers today at the Supreme Court, so it's challenging the results of the elections. And then we have another election in Angola, very important elections, Definitely. But we'll get into the details during the course of the conversation.
Definitely. Right now, let's start with Angola, where political parties and voters are gearing up for the tightest race ever in a general election due to hold on Wednesday, August 24th. The incumbent president, João Lourenço, of the Popular Movement for the Liberation of Angola, MPLA, a party that has been in power for 47 years, is seeking to renew his first term. His main opponent is Adalberto da Costa Jr., head of the National Union for the Total Independence of Angola's UNITA party.
A total of 8 candidates are seeking the country's top job, according to the National Electoral Commission. More than 14 million voters are eligible to cast their ballots in the general election. This year marks the 4th election in Angola's post-war period and the 5th electoral process since 1992. It is also the first in which Angolans living abroad will be able to vote. Now, joining us live from the Angolan capital, Luongo, this evening on the conversation is Francisco Kapalo Ngongo, a political economic analyst and international consultant. We also have Claudio Silva, a political analyst. He also joins from Luongo. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you for having us.
So I'll go first with Claudio. Claudio, can you please paint us a picture of the electoral landscape as we approach D-Day? It's less than 48 hours away. What's the situation like on the ground? And are you confident the elections will be free and fair?
It's important to understand first that Angola has never had truly free and fair elections because it's a country that is still very much dominated by the ruling political party. This is a party that is used to having absolute power. It used to be a one-party state from 1975 to 1992. And since the war ended, we've had 4 different elections with varying degrees of success. But the absolute stranglehold that MPLA has over the Angolan state and the absolute control that it has over our public media continues to be very evident. So there have already been various violations of the electoral law that MPLA approved themselves with no votes from the opposition. But generally, things here are quite calm. Each party has had their last political rally. UNITA just finished their rally, or it's probably still ongoing, but it's about to be done. And electoral campaigns stop today officially. Tomorrow is a so-called day of reflection, and then we go to the voting polls on Wednesday. But just to reiterate, this is not a country known for its stellar democratic process. It's a democracy in tradition. It's under construction, and that impacts the way that parties do elections, do campaigns. It impacts the rhetoric used by the contestants, and it impacts our relationship as well to the voting process. I mean, this is a country that has no debate amongst the presidential candidates. There were no debates whatsoever among the candidates. The only access we've had to their campaign plans and to the idea of what they will do if they win is through their manifestos that were widely shared on WhatsApp and on social media, and through 5 to 10 minute videos and radio jingles that they'll put on television and on public radio and they have been doing so for the past month. So this is one of the only ways that the electorate has any idea of what these leaders are thinking. So it's still a democracy in progress.
Okay, I'll move over to Francisco now. You mentioned so many peculiarities with Angola election, and one which I took note of was democracy in construction, where there's actually there's been no debate, but rather they have manifestos. So, Francisco, are the voters anticipating this election, and what do you think is top on their list if they are?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this election, the fifth one after the conflict in Angola, is still the challenging one, but the most competitive in terms of campaign trail. It reminds many voters of 1992, where two candidates, Jonas Savimbi and Dos Santos, were stronger, but it ended up with a conflict. But the situation now is completely different, because in 1992, UNITA and MPLA had their own army and ready to fight. But at this time, all opposition parties are civilian. They don't have any army. So there's no way for any conflict that will be, will happen, post-electoral conflict that will be against the civilian. Because civilian, they don't have any army to fight, and that can end up to be a crime against humanity. But the election itself, the leader of opposition party and the civil society, member of civil society, they've already come up with a claim of fraud. The fraud, the leader of UNITA is mentioning they are almost 2.5 million of people, dead people in the list of electoral list, and other people, they don't live in the country, they are in mentioned as electoral. And that is very challenging, because among those one is even people that, who passed away before 2008 election. That was the first post-conflict multi-party election. So this is one of the top issues and the confusing one.
But has anything been done about it, Francisco? This 2.5 million people, or so-called ghost voters, has anything been done about it?
For the government side, or the Electoral Commission, they are saying it's not going to be a problem, because for them, they receive the data, the database as they are, and they were no time to do the evaluation and to take out those names. But for the opposition party, they are accusing to be already one of the main signal of electoral fraud. So for the opposition party, they think one of the solution is they are calling that in Portuguese vote and stay. So people vote and they take 500 meters to wait until the polling, the election polling give the result of the election. But for the government, it's funding that as is going to create confusion, and they are going to put police, and they don't allow anyone after voting to stay. And after voting, you have to leave the polling station. So I think that is the most challenging question up to now. Any Angolan is answering. Both sides are saying they have their position, and we don't have a clear answer. So we are waiting for after tomorrow to see what will happen.
Silvio. Now, Silvio, I did read your analysis on the Mail and Guardian's The Continent. You did posit that this could actually be the closest, that the MPLA is in danger of losing these elections. Now, 73% of Angola's population is under the age of 30. The opposition's charismatic leader, Alberto Costa, Alberto Costa Jr. enjoys widespread support amongst young Angolas. How much of a game changer could this be in the polls? Because a lot of these young people have no memories of the civil war between UNITA and MPLA.
You're right. That's completely right. And Dr. Francisco makes a very good point about the number of dead electors on the voting list, which it just comes to show how much people have lost faith in Angola's institutions. And there's widespread discomfort and a lack of belief that the Angolan National Electoral Commission can actually come good this time. And this belief is harbored by a younger generation of voters that has never quite had this belief with our institutions, because they've just seen them being co-opted by the political party in power right now. Historically, the Angolan government has treated the voting process as something for its Western partners to see. It's not really in their interest to have an ingrained sense of democracy within the electorate, because then it would open them to this kind of challenge that we're seeing now, not just from the opposition party UNITA, but from the voters themselves. And I feel like for the first time, these elections aren't really about political parties per se, but rather about a regime attempting to maintain power at all costs. But it's a regime that no longer knows its own electorate. It's no longer used to speaking to the new generation. The rhetoric that it used in the past doesn't have the same impact. If you're trying to scare people with talk of war, what happens when these people don't have memory of war?
Exactly.
What happens when they openly flaunt your fear campaign? What happens when they openly mock and laugh at your attempts at propaganda? And we've come to a point now in Angola where we'll see one thing on social media and something completely different on state national television, to the point that we stopped watching television. We stopped watching the news on a daily basis, because we've all realized that most of it are unfortunately lies. And it feels many times that the government is talking down to us, that they assume that we are illiterate and that we do not know how to consume information. And this type of belittling has completely backfired. So when we listen to speeches by other politicians, perhaps in other political parties, we feel that we're talking to somebody that views us as their equal, that views us as the people with which power resides. They view us as the people that can put them in a position of leadership. And unfortunately, MPLA's rhetoric is still very arrogant. It's still very top down. It's not as inclusive, and that just turns off this new generation of voters. And it doesn't seem like they completely grasp the fact that most of the voters now do not have any memory of civil war, do not remember, were not alive for the liberation war, do not understand this quasi-socialist rhetoric that MPLA loves to employ. And it's just a different generation.
All right, Claudio, aside from Adalberto and of course the young population, what about João Lourenço? I mean, he came on the mantra of a new era for Angola after winning over 61% of the vote in the 2017 elections. I mean, how popular is he, and how would you rate his assessment so far after 5 years in office?
João Lourenço's first year in office was one of immense popularity. He was very popular amongst youth and even among older voters, because he had the courage to begin a long fight against corruption. And he did some excellent financial and economic reforms. Not enough, but it was a great way to get his mandate started. Unfortunately, however, he's losing his way. When the Angolan people began to realize that even Lourenço's own colleagues, people he had put in positions of leadership and power, next to him were credibly accused of corruption, and he did nothing, people began to notice that he had and another for himself. And Lourenço's position became increasingly hardened, not just because of the massive amounts of criticism he was receiving, but also because his flagship initiative, the fight against corruption, was seen to be failing. And he sat through some of the biggest corruption scandals we've had so far in this country, and it exposed our judicial system as completely inadequate. I mean, this is a country that, for almost its entire existence, has never prosecuted people for corruption. This is the first time that we saw ministers and the Santos family members being tried for corruption in our courts, but our courts are completely unprepared. For the entire duration of our independence from Portugal, they've never had to deal with these hot potatoes, if you will. We didn't have the opportunity to build up our institutions, not just because of war, but also because the Int'l decided to co-opt and insert itself in each facet of the Angolan state, including all of its judicial institutions. So go ahead. So it's again the lacking credibility that we see with our local institutions has really eroded the support amongst the population.
Thank you, Claudio. Now, Dr. Francisco, I won't be jumping the gun if I say that these elections are going to be a two-horse race between João Lorenzo and Alberto Costa Jr. Now, talking about João Lorenzo, last month when he was launching his campaign, President João Lorenzo urged people to vote for the MPLA to honor Dos Santos's legacy. Mr. Dos Santos's body was repatriated from Barcelona today. I think he arrived in Luongo. Now, Dos Santos's legacy is quite contentious. He supervised an almost kleptocratic government of patronage and state capture. Conservative estimates say about $24 billion in all revenue are unaccounted for during his reign. So is there much to gain politically by aligning himself with the late president and his legacy, Eduardo dos Santos? Or is he shooting himself in the foot by doing so?
I think he's shooting himself by foot by doing so, because many analysts and critics are questioning even the campaign of President Lorenzo. And the contradiction is having on different speeches in campaign. But let me go to the point of corruption, what Claudio just mentioned. The corruption process of Dos Santos, I think, is one of the weakest link. He came, the first year he started with the process of corruption, but it ended up to be a political propaganda, which didn't have a clear strategic way of how to fight corruption in the country where the corruption is become a way of living. In the country where someone is having a salary of 500 USD can buy a car of 50,000 USD cash, or a house of 100 or 1,000 or 200,000 cash. So the corruption in Angola is a life of, it's become a culture. And this corruption of Lorenzo was criticized not only by corrupt people, but also by people as being targeting for specific people, mainly the family of the former president. And the way the body has been treated by the family, the daughter and the son of the former president was not happy, was not even.
Yeah, they wanted him to be buried in Spain, I believe, in Portugal.
They wanted to keep the body and to be buried after the election, not before the election. And also there are problem family between the widow and the daughters. So using this body, Dos Santos coming back to Angola, I think for many young people, it's just a political distraction, and that's they are not going to buy that strategy. So the only fear for young people and for many observers is the Electoral Commission if they can manipulate the vote, then that's it's a difficult situation to control. But
Okay.
using Dos Santos coming back to be buried to Angola, I think many people, they are not even interested by that.
All right. Okay. Let's bring in Claudio into this now. For this election, I believe that Angolans will be voting for the first time. People living abroad will be voting. That this is one of the giant strides a lot of people have talked about. So, how would you rate the Angolan National Electoral Commission? Do you think they're prepared for the election? Have they done well for this election in preparation for the election?
Sorry, can you repeat? The internet faltered for a little bit.
Claudio, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right, I was saying that how would you rate the Angola National Electoral Commission? Do you feel they've done well, especially with the idea of those living abroad Angolans living abroad who will be able to vote for this election?
Yeah, I, as an Angolan that used to live abroad, I'm very happy that my countrymen that don't live here get to vote in these elections. It's been a long time coming, and there was a perception that Angolans that live abroad have tendencies to vote for the opposition. So that's why they've been shut out of our electoral process for so long. We have about 14,400,000 people registered to vote. Of those, a bit less than 21,000 live abroad. So it's a very small number. It doesn't really represent the true number of. It doesn't represent the size of the Angolan diaspora. But again, what can we say about this institution that is the National Electoral Commission? As always, like many other institutions here in Angola, their makeup follows party lines. So incredibly, the party with the most votes in the election is the one that appoints the most members to the National Electoral Commission. It is not truly an independent, equidistant body. Rather, it is overrepresented by Int'l, by people that the Int'l appoints. And as usually happens after the elections, the people that were appointed by the opposition parties and the one person that's appointed by civil society usually ends up disagreeing about one thing or another with the people that were appointed by the sitting government. And that's, when you have institutions
you begin to wonder if Angola is truly a democracy, because, it just negates all principles of democracy. Why do you bother going to the polls in the first place if the electoral umpire is obviously biased and is staffed with members of the ruling political party?
That's why I open by saying that this is not a true democracy yet. We're on the way to becoming one. Excuse me. I would like to point out, though, that this time around, there has been immense local pressure by society itself, by the youth and by older Angolans alike, to hold these institutions to account. Like Dr. Francisco mentioned, the whole Voto Sento movement, which is basically saying vote and then sit there close by to your polling station to quote unquote control your vote. But this just shows you how aware Angolans are to the power that we have as a society. You ask me why we vote, because we need to hold the government to account somehow. Even if it takes us, 5, 7, 8 elections, they need to know that they are accountable to the general population. We need to make them feel pressure by going out to vote in droves, because that's how you participate in the electoral process. We cannot do anything right now about CNA's composition. We cannot do anything right now about dead voters on our list, but we can go vote. That is pretty much one of the only things we can
Claudio,
do.
I'm very happy with what you're saying so far, Claudio, with the fact that the Angolans are actually preparing their mind to come and vote as August 24 comes so close. Thank you so much, Claudio. We do hope for the best. I don't know about MPLA and Adalberto Costa, but we do hope for the best for Angolans. Thank you so much, Claudio, for joining us on this conversation. And of course, Francisco Kapalo for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Francisco.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we'll go for a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be switching stations right now to South Africa, where the politics is gearing up, and we're entering an exciting political period where many of the political parties are undergoing leadership crisis. Well, we'll be right back after the break. Do stay tuned.